The nursery was bathed in the soft amber glow of the nightlight, casting long, gentle shadows against the pastel blue walls. It smelled of lavender baby powder and fresh linen, a scent that, for Emily, had become the definition of peace. Outside, the autumn wind brushed against the siding of the suburban house, a rhythmic scratching that usually lulled her to sleep. But tonight, sleep was a distant memory. Her eyes were heavy, burning with the exhaustion only a new mother knows, yet her heart was racing with a quiet, gnawing anxiety. She looked down at the bassinet where her 2-week-old son Ethan slept. His chest rose and fell in a perfect, tiny rhythm. He was safe. He was perfect. But the heavy silence of the room was broken by a sound that made the hair on Emily's arms stand up, a low, rumbling vibration from the corner of the room. It wasn't the wind. It was Max. Max was their 3-year-old pit bull, a rescued velvet hippo with eyes the color of warm honey and a heart that seemed too big for his muscular chest. For years, Max had been their first baby. He had spent 9 months resting his blocky head on Emily's growing belly, listening to Ethan's heartbeat before he was even born. Everyone had warned them about the breed, about the dangers of having a powerful dog around the newborn, but Emily and Michael had laughed them off. They knew Max's soul. He was gentle, goofy, and endlessly patient. Or so they thought. Because what Emily saw in the dim light that night didn't look like her goofy boy. It looked like a predator. Max was standing rigid by the crib, his body tense as a coiled spring. His ears were pinned back against his skull, and his gaze wasn't soft anymore. It was fixed, intense, and unblinking. He wasn't looking at Emily. He was staring directly at the sleeping baby. "Max?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Come here, boy. Leave him alone." Usually, a whisper was all it took for Max to wiggle his whole body in happiness, but tonight he didn't move a muscle. He let out a huff of air through his nose, took a step closer to the crib, and let out a whine that sounded almost like a growl. Emily felt a cold knot of fear tighten in his stomach. She had read the books on introducing dogs to babies. They said to watch for jealousy, for territorial behavior. Was this it? Was the displacement of his status finally hitting him? She stepped forward to pick up Ethan, her maternal instinct flaring up like a siren. But as she reached for the bassinet, Max did something he had never done in his life. He stepped between her and the baby. He used his heavy shoulder to block her path, pushing against her legs with a force that nearly made her stumble. "Max, no!" she snapped, louder this time. The dog didn't back down. He turned his head toward her, not snapping, but with a desperate, wide-eyed look that Emily couldn't interpret. He nudged the bassinet hard with his nose, making it rock violently. Ethan stirred, letting out a small cry. Panic flooded Emily's veins. In that moment, she didn't see her family pet. She saw an 80-pound animal overpowering her child. "Michael!" she screamed, the sound tearing through the quiet house. "Michael, help!" Footsteps thundered down the hallway. The door burst open, revealing Michael, disheveled and wide-eyed, wearing only his boxers. What is it?" he gasped, scanning the room for danger. "It's Max!" Emily cried, grabbing Max's collar and pulling him back with all her strength. The dog dug his claws into the carpet, resisting, his eyes still locked on the crib. "He won't let me near Ethan. He's pushing the crib. He's acting crazy." Michael moved quickly, his face hardening. He saw the tension in the dog's body, the way Max was frantically trying to get back to the baby, ignoring commands he knew for years. To a terrified parent, it looked like aggression. It looked like the beginning of a tragedy they had seen on the news. "Max, out!" Michael bellowed in the small room. He grabbed Max by the collar, his knuckles turning white. Max let out a sharp bark, a sound of pure frustration, and tried to twist out of Michael's grip to get back to the corner of the room. But Michael was stronger. He dragged the reluctant dog out of the nursery, down the hallway, and toward the back door. Emily scooped Ethan up, holding him tight against her chest, her heart hammering against her ribs. She heard the sliding glass door open and slam shut downstairs. Then the lock clicked. Silence returned to the house, but it was heavy now. Heavy with guilt and fear. When Michael came back upstairs, he looked defeated. He sat on the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. He was growling, Em. I felt it in his chest when I grabbed him. I know, Emily whispered, tears stinging her eyes. He was trying to move the bassinet, Michael. What if he hurts him? What if we were wrong about him? The question hung in the air, a poisonous thought that neither one of them wanted to voice. Max was family. The idea of him being a danger was heartbreaking. But looking at their fragile newborn, the instinct to protect overpowered the love for the dog. He can't sleep inside tonight, Michael said firmly, though his voice cracked. We can't risk it, not with Ethan here. Outside, the weather had turned. A cold drizzle had started to fall, tapping against the window pane. From the backyard, a sound drifted up that broke Emily's heart. A long, mournful howl. It wasn't an angry bark. It was a plea. Max was scratching at the back door, a rhythmic thumping that echoed through the floorboards. Thump, thump, how-woo. He sounds so scared, Emily said, clutching the baby monitor as if it were a lifeline. He's confused, Michael tried to rationalize, lying back down and staring at the ceiling. He's just jealous. He needs to learn boundaries. Tonight, he stays out. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do with him. They didn't say the words, but the implication was there. If Max couldn't be trusted, he couldn't stay. Emily tried to close her eyes, but the scratching didn't stop. It was relentless. Max wasn't giving up. Most dogs would have found a dry spot under the patio and gone to sleep, but Max was pacing. She could hear his heavy paws on the deck, back and forth, back and forth. Every few minutes, he would throw his body weight against the door. It was annoying at first. Then it became unsettling. Why won't he just stop? Emily whispered into the dark. She looked at the clock, 2 a.m. The scratching had been going on for 2 hours. It was behavior bordering on obsession. A deep primal instinct told Emily that something was wrong, not with the dog, with the situation. But exhaustion is a powerful drug. Her eyelids grew heavy, the adrenaline faded into fatigue, and slowly the rhythmic sound of the rain and the scratching blended into a hypnotic noise. She drifted into a light, uneasy sleep, holding Ethan's hand through the bars of the bassinet. She didn't know it then, but she had made a mistake that could cost them everything. Because outside, in the cold rain, Max wasn't throwing a tantrum. He wasn't jealous. He was frantic. He could smell what the humans couldn't. He could hear the crackle that was too high-pitched for human ears. And while Emily slept, the wall behind the crib, the very spot Max had been staring at, began to feel warm to the touch. The sun didn't rise so much as the gray sky just lightened, casting a dull, flat pallor over the house. Emily woke with a stiff neck and a headache to throb behind her eyes. She sat up, listening. The house was silent. The scratching had stopped. A bolt of panic shot through her. Had Max run away? Had he finally given up on them just as they had given up on him the night before? She threw off the covers, the cold morning air biting at her bare legs, and rushed to the window overlooking the backyard. The grass was slick with mud and fallen leaves. And there, curled into a tight, shivering ball right against the glass of the sliding door, was Max. He wasn't sleeping. His eyes were open, bloodshot and rimmed with red, fixed intently on the upstairs window. He looked soaked, miserable, and utterly broken. Emily felt a sob catch in her throat. "Oh, Michael," she shook her husband awake. "Look at him. We have to let him in. He's freezing." Michael groaned, rubbing his face. The anger from the night before had faded, replaced by the dull ache of regret. "All right," he muttered, pulling on his robe. "I'll go get him. But keep the nursery door closed, Em. We can't have a repeat of last night."
Emily nodded, turning back to check on Ethan. The baby was still asleep, a peaceful bundle in the center of the chaos. She felt a wave of protectiveness, but also a deep, confusing guilt. How could the dog she loved so much turn into a threat overnight? She heard the sliding door open downstairs. She expected the sound of Michael's voice, maybe a stern command to sit or stay. Instead, she heard a scramble of claws on hardwood. "Max, no, stop!" Michael shouted from the kitchen. But it was too late. The sound of heavy paws thundering up the stairs was unmistakable. He wasn't walking. He was sprinting. Emily's heart stopped. She was standing right next to the crib. She spun around just as Max barreled through the bedroom door, his wet fur matted, his chest heaving. He didn't look at her. He didn't stop for a greeting. He didn't even shake the rain off his coat. He launched straight at the bassinet. "Max!" Emily screamed, throwing her body forward to intercept him, but he was too fast and too strong. He didn't attack. He didn't bite. He reared up on his hind legs, planting his muddy front paws delicately on the edge of the mattress right next to Ethan's sleeping Ed. And then he did the unthinkable. He lowered his heavy head and wrapped his front legs around the baby's lower body, curling himself around the infant like a living shield. He began to whine, a high-pitched, frantic sound that vibrated in his throat. He looked up at Emily, his eyes wide with terror, and then nudged the baby's shoulder with his wet nose, harder this time. "Get him off! Michael, get him off!" Emily shrieked, grabbing Max's collar. Michael burst into the room, breathless. He lunged for the dog, grabbing his torso to haul him away. "Bad dog! What is wrong with you?" Max growled, not at Michael, not at Emily. He turned his head and barked ferociously at the wall behind the crib, a deep, booming bark that shook the windows. "He's lost his mind," Michael gasped, struggling to pull the 80-pound dog away. Max's claws dragged across the floor, but he wouldn't let go of the crib. He was anchoring himself there. "Wait," Emily said. Her voice was barely a whisper. She had stopped pulling. She was staring at Max. He wasn't looking at the baby anymore. He was staring intently at the electrical outlet tucked behind the bassinet stand, the one the nightlight was plugged into. And then she saw it. A tiny, almost invisible wisp of gray smoke curling up from the socket.
The room went silent, the struggle forgotten. Emily leaned in closer, and suddenly the smell hit her. It wasn't baby powder anymore. It was the sharp chemical stench of melting plastic and singed insulation. It was faint, masked by the old house smells, but up close it was undeniable. "Michael?" Emily choked out, pointing a trembling finger. "The wall!" Michael let go of Max and touched the drywall above the outlet. He pulled his hand back instantly with a hiss of pain. "It's burning hot! The wall is burning hot!" As if acknowledging they finally understood, Max stopped growling. He looked at Emily, then at the door, and gave a sharp, demanding bark. "Move!" The realization hit them like a physical blow. The frantic behavior, the pushing of the crib, the refusal to leave. Max hadn't been trying to hurt Ethan. He had been trying to drag the bassinet away from the heat source. He had been trying to get the baby out of the blast zone. "Get Ethan!" Michael roared, the panic in his voice real and raw. "Get him out of here now!" Emily didn't think. She snatched Ethan from the crib, clutching him so tight he woke with a startled cry. "Go! Go!" Michael pushed her toward the hallway. Suddenly, a loud pop echoed from behind the crib, sounding like a gunshot. A spark showered down onto the carpet, and the plastic faceplate of the outlet melted away, revealing an orange glow pulsing inside the wall cavity. The fire wasn't starting. It had been smoldering inside the insulation all night, starving for oxygen, waiting to breach. And now it had found air. Smoke began to billow out, thick and black, instantly filling the top of the room. The smoke detector, which had been silent all night due to the fire being trapped in the wall, finally screamed into life, a piercing, deafening alarm. "Max, come!" Michael yelled, coughing as the acrid smoke hit his lungs. But Max waited. He stood at the top of the stairs, looking back to make sure Emily and the baby were ahead of him. Only when he saw Emily reach the bottom landing did he descend, staying between Michael and the growing smoke cloud above. They burst out the front door and into the cold morning rain, stumbling onto the wet lawn. Emily ran until her legs gave out, collapsing near the mailbox, shielding Ethan from the drizzle with her body. Michael was right behind her, phone in hand, already dialing 911, and standing guard over them, shivering from the cold and the adrenaline, was Max. He didn't run off. He sat down directly in front of Emily and Ethan, facing the house, watching the window of the nursery. Moments later, the upstairs window shattered. Flames, angry and violet, licked up the side of the house, devouring the white siding where the nursery used to be. The fire had traveled fast through the old dry timber of the walls. If they had been in that room for 5 more minutes, if they had slept through the smoke. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder, but Emily couldn't hear them. All she could hear was the blood rushing in her ears and the steady, heavy breathing of the dog sitting at her feet. She looked down at Max. His coat was matted with mud, his eyes were drooping with exhaustion, and he had a small cut on his nose from pressing against the glass door all night. She remembered dragging him out of the room. She remembered locking him in the rain. She remembered thinking he was a monster. Tears mixed with the rain on her face as she reached out a trembling hand. She didn't pet him. She buried her fingers into the thick fur of his neck, pulling him close until his wet head rested on her knee, right next to the baby he had refused to abandon. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Max." Max let out a long, deep sigh, closed his eyes, and licked the tiny hand of the baby peeking out from the blanket. He wasn't angry. He was just relieved. His pack was safe. The lights of the fire trucks painted the wet street in kaleidoscopic bursts of red and white, reflecting off the puddles and the sleek, soaked coat of the dog, who sat like a statue amidst the chaos. The firefighters moved with practiced urgency, their hoses snaking across the lawn like giant serpents, battling the blaze that had now consumed the entire second floor. An hour later, as the smoke turned from black to a heavy, settling gray, a soot-streaked fire captain approached the ambulance where Emily was being checked over. Ethan was sleeping soundly in her arms, blissfully unaware that he had almost become a memory. "Ma'am? Sir?" the captain asked, lifting his helmet. "We managed to knock it down before it took the whole structure, but the nursery's gone. We found the source." Michael squeezed Emily's shoulder, his face pale. "It was the outlet, wasn't it?" The captain nodded grimly. "Faulty wiring inside the wall. It's been smoldering for a long time. It's what we call an arc fault. It creates a high-frequency buzzing sound and a specific ozone smell long before the smoke becomes visible to humans." He paused, looking down at Max, who was sitting by Michael's leg, watching the firefighter with guarded eyes. "You said your dog woke you up." Michael's voice broke. "He tried all night. We threw him out because we thought he was trying to hurt the baby." The firefighter crouched down, extending a gloved hand toward Max. The pit bull sniffed it cautiously, then gave a small wag of his tail. "He wasn't attacking the baby," the captain said softly, scratching Max behind his ears. "He was trying to move him. Dogs can hear that electrical arcing inside the walls. It drives them crazy. He knew that room was a death trap. If he hadn't forced you to wake up, well, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I'd be recovering bodies." The weight of those words crashed down on Emily like a physical blow. She looked at the blackened window of what used to be the nursery. She thought about the scratching at the door, the howling in the rain, the desperate way he had wrapped his body around Ethan. Every action they interpreted as aggression was actually an act of desperate,
sacrificial love. He had been willing to be yelled at, dragged away, and left in the freezing rain just so he could be there to save them when the moment came. In the weeks that followed, life was different. They stayed in a rental while the house was rebuilt, but the dynamic of the family had shifted permanently. Max was no longer just a pet. He was the patriarch. There was no more talk of boundaries or keeping him out of the room. When Emily sat down to nurse Ethan, Max was there, resting his chin on her knee. When Ethan slept, Max slept on the rug beside the crib, his ears twitching at every sound, the silent guardian who never clocked out. One evening, Emily watched them from the doorway. Ethan was doing tummy time on the carpet, babbling at the ceiling. Max was lying next to him, his massive head resting gently near the baby's tiny hand. Ethan reached out, his clumsy fingers gripping the loose skin of Max's nose. Emily held her breath for a second. Old habits die hard. But Max didn't pull away. He simply closed his eyes and let out a soft, contented sigh, accepting the touch of the boy he had claimed as his own. Emily walked over and sat on the floor with them. She stroked Max's velvet fur, tracing the faint white scar on his nose where he'd cut it on the glass door that terrifying night. It was a badge of honor now. A reminder of the night he refused to give up on them. "Thank you," she whispered, kissing the top of his blocky head. "Thank you for being smarter than us." Max opened one honey-colored eye, thumped his tail once against the floor, and went back to sleep. We often think we're the ones rescuing these animals. We pick them from shelters, give them names, and tell ourselves we saved a life. But looking at Max, this gentle, misunderstood soul who saw the danger when the world was blind, Emily finally understood the truth. They hadn't saved Max. Max had been waiting his whole life to save them. Sometimes the things we fear are only trying to protect us. And sometimes, saving someone else is the only way to save yourself. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and share it with someone who loves dogs. And remember, listen to your pets. They might just know something you don't. See you in the next video.